Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's fireside chat, MustardHub Voices Behind the Build, where we talk with people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. My guest today, the brilliant Rebecca Monet. Rebecca is a behavioral scientist who specializes in human performance, specifically as it relates to business ownership and leadership roles. She's the founder of Zorakle Profiles, a profiling tool based on 7 statistically validated sciences. These sciences determine franchisee employee compatibility and predict performance. Zorakle tools provide franchise companies a means to reduce training, support, and litigation costs while increasing employee and franchisee satisfaction, validation, and performance. Welcome, Rebecca.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Curtis.
Me too. Where are you based? Where are you chatting with me from today?
I am from the Ozarks. I am in Northwest Arkansas right now. What a change from San Diego after 40 years in San Diego, but I'm adapting. I'm adapting.
So before we dive in, I have a super personal question. You have a really interesting LinkedIn headline. Tell me quickly about being a professional cupcake maker.
Oh my gosh, Curtis, I love making fancy cupcakes. It actually started years ago when my kids came out to visit me with their 2 children, my grandchildren, and it was Easter. And I decided we were going to decorate cupcakes. So I got all the special gear to make designs and fluff things up. And I'm sitting with my beautiful daughter in law, my granddaughter, and at that time, my 4-year-old grandson, and my mucho macho son, who's like 250 pounds, all muscles, 6'2", and he just thinks he's a manly man, right? And we're decorating cupcakes, and he's like, men don't decorate cupcakes, we don't do this kind of thing. But he's also OCD, he likes perfection.
Okay.
So as we're making cupcakes, he is going insane because he thinks he can do it better. Pretty soon he's like in the midst of those cupcakes, fixing things and decorating things. Suffice it to say, it's become a tradition. Any main event that we have at my home, we decorate cupcakes, and the boys, it's mandatory. The macho boys
Love
also
it.
participate.
I bet you didn't see that question coming right out.
No, I wasn't expecting that at all.
So you apply your knowledge, your experience, and talent in the world of franchising. How did you end up in that unique niche space?
And franchising is indeed quite unique. Honestly, the history of it is I was a therapist years ago, and
Okay.
I worked exclusively with entrepreneurs. I didn't deal with marital issues, alcohol issues. It was what's between the 2 ears that's causing success in someone's business. Today, we would call that a coach, but back then I was a therapist, a licensed therapist to do that. And then from there, one of my clients who ran a big business in San Diego asked if what I was teaching, which included the psychographics, if I could do that in a group situation. So he put together 300 uh, entrepreneurs into a room at a hotel, and we began to teach them some of these philosophies and techniques. And that took me to traveling all over the world, teaching entrepreneurs how to build businesses. And then one day, my daughter uh, became a little wild. She was a teenager, wild child, like a lot of teenagers. And I decided it was time that we stopped the traveling, stopped going all over the world. And so I went to bed one night and I prayed. And I said, God, I can't travel anymore. I need eyes on my children. I was a single mom. And what's next? What should I be doing? And the answer I got was business broker. At that time, I didn't know what a business broker was. So I reached above my refrigerator, got the yellow pages down. If you remember those, you might be too young,
I
Curtis.
do. Oh, I definitely
Do
do.
you remember those? And I opened it up. I called every broker a business broker that was in the book. There's four of them in San Diego. And I called and I basically said, my name is Rebecca Monet. I'm a behavioral scientist. I want to learn everything you do. You don't have to pay me. I'll come to work for you. Just let me follow you around. And I met a gentleman who said yes. Three said no, one said yes. His name was Howie Bassick. He was the inventor of franchise brokering. And so we spent the next several years him teaching everything about franchising. I taught him everything I knew about behavioral science. But the fascinating part about franchising was I was able to, in seclusion, measure the skills, aptitudes, value sets, all of the things necessary to grow a business for an individual that ran their own business. But I had never been able to measure something that's in a living, breathing organism like franchising, where they're providing an operational system, right? And then the franchisees working underneath that, but they're still somewhat independent. So
Yeah.
as a behavioral scientist, I'm like, yay, I get to measure more things. I get to figure out what happens to a franchisor as they grow and what happens to their culture and their systems and how that affects their franchisees. And I can also measure all these attributes of a franchisee as they themselves grow, sometimes in tandem, sometimes faster. So that's how I was introduced to franchising. And like many, I have fallen deeply in love with franchising. I call it the last bastion of the free enterprise system. So I'm a big believer in the free enterprise system.
It's I mean, it's an incredibly special place. It's it or space, I should say, and the people just in the entire world of franchising are incredibly welcoming. So, what kind of clients do you work with in franchising? If you had to maybe specifically, right, and then tell me, why do they come to you?
So I work with three types of clients. I work with the franchisor,
Okay.
to help assess their franchisees and audit their systems to determine who's a right fit franchisee for them. I work with franchise brokers who work with candidates looking to buy a business and wanting to know who that individual is and also where they're going to be a good fit. And I work with franchisees to assess employees that would be a good fit within their franchise organization. So
Got
the
it.
problems I solve are everything from retention issues, engagement issues, performance issues, sometimes even horrible things like litigation because they have a poor fit.
Mhm.
Um, so all the typical things that would happen, cost of training, cost of support, those would be the issues I would be dealing with, whether it's at the ZOR level or the franchisee level, a lot of which can be solved by making sure someone's a good fit within their organization.
And just for reference and context for anybody listening who's not familiar with the franchise space, this is one of the things that I learned a long time ago when I got into it. Franchisors we refer to as Zors, aptly enough, and franchisees we refer to as the Zs, the Zors and the Zs. Um, so you kind of answered this next question I really had about problems that you're really kind of obsessed with solving for these organizations. But what are some trends you're seeing in franchising, or maybe what's the next trend in franchising that we don't really see coming yet through your lens?
So I've been in the franchise space now 32 years, started in 1993. So I've seen many, many things evolve and change. A couple notable ones is we are seeing more and more women stepping into business ownership. When I first started, I would go to a conference and maybe 10% of folks that were at those conferences were women. Now it's about 30%. So women actively searching for businesses. And what's really fascinating is women tend to rise to the top in franchising. They seem well suited for franchising. The other trend that I am seeing is the age of our franchisee is dropping. When I started in 1993, the average age was almost 52 years old. Today, it's 44. So people are catching on that you don't have to have corporate jobs. There's another option. You may still choose the corporate way, and that might be the right fit for you. But younger and younger individuals are choosing business ownership, entrepreneurship, and of course, franchising. The third trend that I'm seeing that I'm finding fascinating because I am a baby boomer is baby boomers who are investing heavily in these younger generations, putting their wisdom and experience and education into younger people, even financing them, coming in as partners, coming in as financiers, coming in as coaches and mentors, which is allowing these younger people to come in with a greater stability and encouragement than maybe I had when I was that age. So those are three really big trends that we're seeing in the world of franchising.
One thing I really want to learn a little bit about. I know that in your experience working with franchise systems, you probably see some people-related challenges, right? Given what you do, that create roadblocks to maybe some operational or strategic progress. Um, I kind of want to play off of these trends that you're seeing about how the average age is skewing younger than it has historically. Um, Oftentimes, a lot of younger people don't necessarily have the management experience, right? And so I'm kind of curious if you see that playing a factor where they're jumping into some of these roles or business ownership, right, without having some of that leadership experience. And if you see that as being one of those things that might create some of these challenges, or tell me a little bit about that. I'm kind of curious.
I love this question because clearly there are issues that these younger generations are dealing with that are unique to them. Um, the leadership, the management skills that you talked about, many times they haven't had the opportunity to build experience in those areas. So they do lack in management skills and leadership skills. So we would call those hard competencies or skills. But the area where I'm seeing greater challenges is in the soft skills.
Okay.
Uh, Things like grit, right? The ability to go over the mountain, through the mountain, under the mountain to get to your goals, that tenacity, that resilience,
Mm.
that drive, the optimism that keeps us going, even things like initiative. And commitment. We're seeing those markers actually dropping where folks that are taking less initiative, which is a form of courage. Initiative is a form of courage. And the younger generations haven't had those same risk levels that, let's say, a baby boomer would do, or even a Gen Xer. So they don't have that muscle to get through the hard times or take risks like we used to, or make that phone call or reach out to that networking group or step out of their comfort zone. So they're not quite as capable of commitment. We're all about instant gratification now. We're all about technology now. So it's the soft markers, Curtis, that I'm noticing are dropping and honestly causing me some concerns
Mm.
as to future success, how franchisors might be adapting to that to help franchisees that maybe lack some of these skills to make sure they learn them and build those muscles so they can build the businesses they want.
How do you advise if you see those on the radar? How do you advise your franchisor or your franchisee, frankly, right? If you're helping them with more building their teams, what kind of
Yeah,
advice do you give them?
That's a tough one because we are a research firm, a technology firm is what we are. So I can bang the bell a lot of times and educate, right? Is one of the ways that I can handle that is warning our franchisees that there's some trends going on that they need to be prepared for. Franchisors that reach out to us for specific help, there are many recommendations, some of which they're already doing. When you have a younger franchisee running a business and they lack in the soft skills and the hard skills simply due to lack of education or lack of experience or lack of opportunity even, then things like mentoring and coaching and assigning them to someone that's a few steps ahead will definitely be beneficial. When we call something a skill, whether it's management skills, operational skills, sales skills, initiative skills, or commitment skills, these are skills, meaning we can learn them. So a franchisor can provide field coaches, training, and support to develop that, which obviously means first they have to measure it to know where that individual is, and look at ways that they can, expound on that or enhance that particular skill.
I mean, what are some of the most recurring talent or culture related issues you see cropping up in the growing franchise businesses today?
Are we talking culture as in terms of the company's culture or culture that someone is coming from? Because both obviously will affect.
Uh, well, that actually brings up a really interesting point. I was initially referring to like the business and the company's culture, but that's a very insightful kind of way to, I think, interpret that question because I didn't see that.
Yeah, and it really is both. Culture has a huge influence on performance and on compatibility and on retention and on engagement of an employee as well as a franchisee. So a company that understands their culture and creates best practices and systems and environment that nurtures and rewards that culture will create a more consistent brand, of course, but also create consistencies in how we address certain things or how we take care of a customer, as an example. So I would just say, first and foremost, understand your culture, quantify it, right? Identify it. Because the more you know about your culture, then you can set up your best practices and your reward systems to reward the behaviors that create that particular culture. For example, if you have what we call more of a clan or collaborative or family like culture, then you're going to create systems that has regular communication, that's got collaborations. You got buyer co-ops and sharing and marketing expenses if you're a franchisee with your neighbor. You will have the older ones mentoring the younger ones. You're going to reward and give awards out at your conferences, acknowledging the person that was most collaborative or offered the greatest advice or helped somebody else or went on a holiday with someone else. So once you determine what your culture is, then you determine the values, because that's a big part of what culture is, the values and the specific behaviors that will echo those values, that will keep those values in place. And that's not that hard to do. You just have to be able to measure it and then develop those tools and regularly communicate that to your employees as well as your franchisees.
I so I'm curious in your opinion, and I think that this is perfect for a data scientist. Tell me a people blind spot that you've observed, maybe something that business owners tend to overlook when they're trying to fix performance, growth, execution issues. Tell me one of those people blind spots. And I'm sure you have a whole bunch that
Yeah.
nobody would think of.
There's always blind spots that we're not aware of ourselves or a company's not aware about us. One that we've done a ton of research, and especially now with some political changes going on and some tariff things, but this is true generically, no matter what's going on politically and economically, is fear. That many of us won't admit our fears, and the fear for you and the fears for me are going to be different. And if a company doesn't understand the fears of their franchisee or their employees, then things can go sideways. Fear will could be everything from a social fear, an emotional fear, a relational fear, and of course a financial fear. But it's different based on the values of that individual. So, for example, we have a type of individual that we call the emulator. And he or she is very innovative, loves autonomy, loves independence, is always up for a good challenge, loves competition, loves recognition, loves being with companies that have some sex appeal or prestige or uniqueness to them. But their fears are very specific. They have a fear of being embarrassed. It is overwhelming. It's like they have this deep child that cannot handle being embarrassed. So if they mess up at work, or they don't have the numbers as a franchisee, or they make a mistake, that is humiliating and embarrassing. Where as a manager or as a franchisor, you may think, well, it's just a mistake, we'll move on, right? But for them, it can dramatically affect their self esteem. It can dramatically affect many days after that mistake, how they perform, how engaged they're going to be. They'll become more withdrawn. And again, that's just their fear, their number one fear. But you and I may have
That's
other
really interesting.
fears.
Could it possibly have a negative effect even to publicly reward somebody who has that same type of adverse reaction to just this public display of feedback?
It can. It can have a negative effect, especially for the type I just talked about, that emulator. Emulators are really big about recognition, but we don't want to show their boo-boos or their mistakes or their incompetence or their inadequacy. We want to show how they bootstrapped, how they overcame the odds. We want to show how they came up with a really great idea, how they did it alone without money and talent and all of that stuff. So what we're rewarding and what we're recognizing in that individual is different than it would be for another type that's maybe you want to reward or acknowledge or bring to attention things like contribution or making a difference or helping someone else. That's what wants to be rewarded. So you have to be cautious what you're rewarding and what you're not rewarding, because it can have, in some cases, a negative effect, and in some cases, a positive effect. That goes back to your culture question,
Yeah.
right? What's
Yeah.
the culture? Do we have the right person that matches that culture? Then we put the proper reward systems in place to nurture that. But if we're attracting, let's say, this emulator into a societal business that's more about making a difference, education, knowledge, justice, fairness, equity, all of those things, two different people. If we put them in the same culture and reward them the same, one will be deflated and one will be inflated, right? So we want to make sure that we have a consistent, congruent culture and that we're attracting people that fit within that culture.
So across, the best run franchise organizations that you have analyzed, what are some consistent leadership traits or team dynamics that stand out to you?
Um, so there's some consistent things that are needed across the board. But if we're talking about leadership, that includes things like conflict management, team building, collaboration. uh, being a good change catalyst, someone that can instigate a change and get people on board. It includes influence, meaning I have enough authority, enough credibility, enough respect, enough love for you as my employee or my franchisee, that you're going to listen to me and you're going to take my advice in my direction. So leadership has many facets to it, some which we're great at and some where we're not great at. We're typically thinking about leadership as someone that can cast a vision, right? And get people excited about it. But leadership is much, much more than that. It's about feedback and accountability and things that allow someone to know that they're on target. It's about communication. Otherwise, you just have a motivational speaker, right? Someone that can get people charged up, but you're not moving a project or a company forward. You're simply getting people riled up and excited and loving you. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with leaders. In fact, there was a book on this some years back about the top 5 mistakes leaders make. And number one was they want to be liked. And so they're so busy being liked that they're not making those tough decisions. They're not confronting things. They're not handling conflict. They're looking for kumbaya rather than what it takes to move the ball down the field.
I mean, I think that that's a really important distinction to make, identifying how some of these high performing operators and what they do differently from those who maybe repeatedly miss the mark on execution. And, I think you listed a couple of them right there.
Yeah.
How do trust, clarity, and alignment between corporate and the local operators influence measurable outcomes?
So the question was, how do we trust that they're aligned?
How do those things like trust and clarity and alignment between corporate and your local operators, how does that influence those measurable outcomes?
Huge, huge. You can imagine, Curtis, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself with folks that you work with and clients you work with. It's huge when that's not available, when corporate and franchisee or franchisee and employee aren't in alignment. They don't share the values, meaning they're not going to make similar decisions. They don't have similar belief systems. They're not going to spend their time, money, and energy in similar. If they're not aligned in those values, we're naturally going to not trust them because they have a different agenda, a different set of beliefs, a different direction. So we have to be aligned with our values. And then, of course, there needs to be an alignment with culture, which in part is the values and the best practices and the initiatives and the environment and the reward systems. But a lot of that is we have to know exactly where that franchise or company is in terms of the culture, values, stage of growth, skills that they're bringing to the table, their value package, and exactly what a franchisee or an employee needs to bring to the table. When those are in alignment, trust happens.
Yeah.
We are seeing the world the same way.
Have you seen differences in leadership efficacy based on whether a franchisee is like an owner operator or versus a multi-unit investor?
Um, yes. And I say that because I've seen emerging franchisors choose to bring on multi-unit operators, which typically, to your point, have stronger leadership skills, stronger marketing skills, stronger sales skills, stronger operational and finance skills. They usually also have stronger EQ, emotional and social intelligence skills. And so what happens frequently is if you have this someone truly wired for a multi-unit operation, they are consciously deciding, I'm going with a franchise because there's an operating system and brand recognition and processes in place that will help me scale and help me replicate. But they could technically do it on their own. That's a different franchisee than someone who's a hands-on owner operator, maybe a man in the van or a pest control guy or something like that. That's a different franchisee. And the way the franchisor manages that relationship is completely different. What's going to be effective for that multi-unit operator is different than that more hands-on. Even the culture will be different. And if leadership isn't congruent and consistent with the model they've chosen, the multi-unit versus single unit versus area developer, or even a subject matter expert, more of a technician, let's call them, there's going to be breakdown in performance. And never mind, the cost of supporting and training those franchisees is going to go up dramatically because you're basically running two different types of businesses.
So I want to learn more about Spot On. Tell everyone about what Spot On is, who it's for, what it does. Tell me everything.
So the spot on profile is a psychographic assessment that is used with franchisors, franchise brokers, and franchisees to determine a right fit of either a prospective franchisee or an employee. It's based on 7 statistically validated sciences. So it's a meta-analysis approach. So when you think of meta-analysis, think medicine, right? You go with some ailments to your doctor. He's going to run a blood chemistry. He's going to do an x-ray. He's going to, run different tests. And then he's going to look at each of those tests to come up with some conclusions and a protocol. So this is similar. Instead of using like a personality test or skills test, we combine 7 different pieces of logic into a single assessment. So it gives a deeper, more meaningful, more predictive model to know if somebody's a good fit, where they're going to need some additional help or have some challenges. So that's what Zorakle is. That's what the spot on profile
Okay.
is.
Now, are these 7 proprietary, or can we talk about what they are?
Yeah, so they are open source.
Okay.
So you can find these anywhere. The first science is called a values-based logic. It comes from Stanford Research Institute, a
Okay.
program called VALS, where we're looking at the motivators, the drivers, a true predictor of future performance and fit and retention. The second science is the stages of growth science. This is Neil Churchill's work, the Carruthers Institute work, where we measure the predictable stages of growth every company goes through. Things we're looking at is their leadership style, their organizational structure, their current initiatives and goals, how involved the concept originator, what challenges and growing pains and crises are they going through. Some people fit better in early stage companies, some people fit when the franchisor is, a mega company. So that's called stages of growth. We use a cultural model that comes out of the University of Michigan. This determines on 6 primary markers exactly what a franchisor's culture is. And then we also look at competencies. We used to use an aptitude test or a skills test for that, but we found that people that are coming into franchising, owning their own business, are usually very successful people in the corporate world. So they're VP of technology or they're director of human resources. So we needed a tool that looked at their strengths and how highest and best way of using their strengths. So there's an algorithm that is proprietary where we take their strengths from Gallup Research, a strength finder, and we overlap that on the competencies. So even if you've never sold, you never marketed, if you have strengths, you can learn it and learn it quickly.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we talked about the emotional and social intelligence, Dr. Daniel Goleman's work. And then one of my favorite is from Dr. Robert Nedford. He's a sports psychologist. And what we're looking at here is this performance zone where someone is just challenged enough that they have to push themselves. There's enough pressure on them. There's big enough goal that they're going to perform. And what happens when there's too much? Where will they start to drop the ball and make mistakes? And the opposite. Once they master something and they become bored and unengaged and it's not interesting or challenging, where will they start to drop the ball? So those are the 7 sciences, all which are open source. We borrow them. What makes Zorakle unique is how we combine it. We're the only company that uses all of these sciences and reports individually on them and collectively and what that means.
Do you administer these through survey? Is that the typical way to administer these on a per person basis? Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you? Sorry, go ahead.
it's a questionnaire. It's a survey. Yeah.
Okay. Have you noticed any maybe surprising ways that companies are leveraging Spot On or other tools, to support their people or make better choices when it comes to building their teams?
Yeah, it's so interesting. When we first created it, it was designed to help franchise brokers sell more deals, right? And then it evolved into wait, 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 wait. We don't want you just selling deals. We want you putting people in the right place so they'll ramp up well, retain well, perform well, validate well. So it started to be used more for proper fit. As time has gone on, more and more of our companies are using it not just to screen their franchisees and their employees, but to recruit more like that. We have a lot of neuroeconomics and neuroscience built into our logic that helps the marketers go after the right types of individuals. So we can tell them the fonts, the colors, the
Fascinating.
music, the text, everything that's scientifically based that stimulates the brain to be attracted to something and to make a decision. So we call it neuroeconomics. It's a science that's much newer that I am fascinated in studying. So we give a lot of advice to marketers how to do that. In fact, we just did a class on that yesterday,
I
Curtis.
might have to take this.
I'm gonna send it to you. I'll send it to you. And then the other way that it's being used is okay, so we have this current franchisee and we have some markers that are causing some issues. They're having issues keeping employees, they're not performing as well. And so field coaches are using these eclipse reports, a spot on eclipse report, because it does a side by side comparison of ideal versus you. And then the field coaches are using it, operational teams are using it to develop new training, new support, new systems for those individuals. So what we originally thought was just going to be a sales tool has turned out to be much, much, much more
Yeah, well,
than
I
that.
mean, I can see why, and it makes me wonder. And I think this is right up your wheelhouse. When you're analyzing workforce or operational data, where do you often see a disconnect between what companies measure and what actually drives long-term performance, right? What's being tracked that matters and what's being tracked that doesn't matter?
Yeah. It's so interesting because usually it's numbers that are being tracked,
Yeah.
sales, number of leads to sales, customer retention, average ticket sales, those kinds of things, profit margins. But what they're not looking at, and we're really preaching, is the number one financial indicator of both success and compatibility is emotional and social intelligence. A individual who's off 1 or 2 percentage points in any one of the 20 markers in emotional and social intelligence leaves anywhere from 60 to $100,000 on the table in
Oh
revenue.
my God.
So we're not measuring that. I mean, we do, Zorakle does, but many of our companies or franchisors aren't measuring that. And if they worked on those EQ, SQ markers, performance would skyrocket. Just choose 3 where universally your franchisees aren't so good at it. Pick 3 and work on that, and you'll see your financial definitely increase. So they're not dealing with the human side of the business, right? And those softer markers.
Yeah.
They're measuring things like, do they have operational skills? Can they look at a P&L statement? That's all fine and dandy,
Yeah.
but what really makes a difference is the soft skills.
That's amazing, and that you're able to sum it up in that way. I mean, I feel like the world needs to hear that. It's like you've answered maybe the next 100 questions that I have. But how do you see the role of AI, of automation, of predictive analytics, kind of reshaping how franchise leaders manage their teams?
I think there's a good and a bad to everything, right? Um, what I'm seeing as a trend, in fact, I just got off a call with someone, we just talked about this, where AI is being used more and more to predict behavior and buying patterns and attraction strategies based on social media and other things. And gleaning that and then making recommendations based on that. However, social media usage for folks that are franchisees is much lower than someone who is not inclined to business ownership. So you're not going to garner as much information of those that really are wired to be business owners from scouring using AI, social media things, right? It's limited, especially since we are becoming more and more cautious as human beings of what we present. We are guarding our reputation. We are guarding the way we look. So if we're using that to make decisions, I think it's not the full picture. So that's a negative. The positive is if we can use AI in combination with psychographics, which really is that human being. They've told us that. It's not their social media that's saying I'm fabulous and I've, you know, whitewashed my hips, and made them thinner. But it's really who they are. If we use AI to enhance that, how do we communicate with them? What are their fears and concerns? What is it they need in a business? How would they like to be acknowledged and rewarded? If you combine the AI with the psychographics, I think we got a great formula.
Has there? I agree. By the way, has there ever been a moment where your data contradicted leadership intuition? Maybe they went a different direction, or maybe they didn't, but proved right in hindsight.
Yeah. I can think of a fitness concept we worked with just a handful of years ago where we did an audit on the franchisor and we assessed all of their franchisees. They were categorized based on performance and fit. And the franchisor, their perception of the ideal franchisee was so different than
Oh,
what the high performers were. They were going after the guy or the gal that was about sex appeal and prestige and recognition and muscle and nutrition and all of those things. And because they were a combination fitness and nutrition company.
right, right.
And the reality is the superstars in that organization were anything but that. They were trying to make a difference. They were trying to solve health issues. They were educators. They were consultants. They were advisors. They were advocates. They were folks that were leading from their heart, not from their physique, right? A very different individual than what they thought. Ultimately, what happened after we completed the spot on blueprint for them and the marketing blueprint for them, they repositioned their marketing efforts. Those bright reds, those ruby colors that attract that more image conscious individual was toned down to attract a different. We changed the fonts, we changed
Oh,
the messaging to attract more of what we call the societal belonger. And what we saw was performance and retention, by the way, go up in that franchisor.
that's amazing. I want to kind of reflect a little bit and maybe um, reflect and look ahead. Give me a people insight, a cultural competency that tomorrow's business leaders are going to have to develop in order to thrive.
Curtis, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear you.
So, what's one people insight or a cultural competency that tomorrow's business leaders will have to develop in order to thrive?
I think one of the biggest things is meaning. People are screaming to be significant. They're screaming to be seen. They're screaming to be heard and recognized as an independent individual. Everyone wants to feel that they are here for a purpose, that they have meaning. So I think companies, franchisors in particular, need to find a way to pull that meaning out, to discover it. It is the greatest form of compassion and empathy if you can ask yourself, what does this person want me to feel about them? What does this person want me to recognize that might be hidden just a little bit? And how can I recognize him or her? And it almost always goes back to, it's that thing that makes them feel significant. It gives them meaning for the role that they're in, for the business that they chose. And oftentimes it is unconscious and it's rarely spoken or touted. But if companies can learn that, I think we're going to get more engaged employees. We're going to get more profitable franchisees. We're going to have no problems with retention because this person now is seen, heard, respected, appreciated for who they are, not what they can bring to the table. It's not performance based. Performance is a consequence of us recognizing that.
So, if a founder, a franchise operator, asked you for your single most important piece of advice about managing people well,
Oh,
what do you tell them?
wow. You're going to limit me to one?
I am. I mean, one and a half.
I think it's just what we talked about, Curtis. I really do. Um, Take time to know this person and pull out of them what makes them feel they have significance and meaning. Acknowledge it, recognize it, and they will go to the ends of the earth to get you and your company where you want to go.
I think that's first of all, I think that's amazing advice. I think that I did you justice by limiting you to one, um, and I think that that's a pretty powerful closing thought. I think I really appreciate you sharing all of this with us. One last question before we wrap up: if you could wave a magic wand and every business owner adopt one belief about their people, what is that belief?
That belief that you want them to adopt. Wow.
I'll tell you something
I
that's.
think
I
it
don't want to.
has,
I don't want to answer for you, but I do want to tell you something that really stood out to me.
yeah.
What you talked about how all of these things that they think and feel and their fears are are all different. And I think that that's an easy thing to accept and understand and realize and right. And I think that we all sort of maybe have that general perception that it is very different. But I don't know that we really reflect on it, at least not significantly, right? When we think about managing people, right? We all know, I think conceptually, oh, we're all different. We all think different. We feel different. We have different fears. But then when it comes to actually managing people and understanding how we talk to them, how we reward them, how we criticize them, how
Mhm.
we offer feedback to them, what their thoughts and hopes and dreams and fears and all those things are all so different. Again, I'm not trying to answer for you, but that really, when I ask the question, it's something that's already standing out to me in my mind.
And I agree. I would echo completely what you are saying. Um, and sometimes I think that's simply because managers and owners are juggling so many different hats to take that time to really dig in that way and see these things. It takes concerted effort. It takes meditating on it and writing about it and thinking about it and asking questions. and they're busy, right? And they have a timeline, and they're juggling plates, and there's a goal, and so oftentimes what we're thinking about is, okay, what do I need to get to this point? And how can I get these 6 employees to help me get there? Forgetting that these are human beings, these are not robots, right? These are not robots.
Thank you, Rebecca Monet. I want an extra hour or 5. I want to do 10 more of these with you. I feel like we could talk for ages about all of this stuff. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you, kind of enlightening all of us right now. Um,
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for yeah, thank you for tuning in to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. If you got something out of this conversation, share it with a friend or a teammate. Check out mustardhub.com to see how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time, thank you.